Direct we beseech thee, O Lord, our actions by thy holy inspirations, and carry them on by thy gracious assistance, that every word and work of ours may always begin from thee and by thee be happily ended, through Christ our Lord. Amen. Now we'll take leaders' questions under Standing Order 36. Deputy Mary Lou MacDonald, please.
Margaret Ceann Comhairle. Taoiseach, I've been reluctant in raising the matter of Minister Barry Cowan at leaders' questions before today. I absolutely accept that everybody makes mistakes, that people learn from those mistakes and that they move on. And we wanted to give the Minister for Agriculture every opportunity to address all of the matters concerned, to draw a line under them, to move on at a time of huge health and economic challenges, not least for the farming community. And last week, Minister Barry Cowan had the opportunity to do just that by putting all of the facts on the record of the Dáil in relation to his drink driving incident. But unfortunately, he has failed to do that. Taoiseach, we now have an unprecedented situation where a government minister is disputing the Garda Pulse record of a drink driving offence which he was involved in and looking to have that record changed. Last week, in his personal statement, Minister Cowan stated that he was conscious that a constant drip feed of new information can be damaging and destabilising, and he said it was for that reason that he conducted a full examination of all records that he could obtain. And yet here we are, a week later, and the drip feed of new information continues. Taoiseach, on the 4th of July, according to the Sunday Times, contact was made with Minister Cowan regarding the Garda record from the 18th of September 2016, stating that he sought to evade a Garda checkpoint that was on the evening of the drink driving offence. The Irish Times today quote sources that say that you were made aware of these records at the time of this media query. That is to say, the weekend before last. So, Taoiseach, can you confirm for the Dáil when you were made aware of the Garda record of Minister Cowan's attempt to evade a Garda checkpoint? Were you aware of this before Minister Cowan made his statement to the Dáil? Did Minister Cowan discuss with you or seek advice from you regarding his decision to seek to amend the record relating to his 2016 drink driving conviction? Do you accept that Minister Cowan's statement to the Dáil was incomplete, as it made no mention of this Garda record? When did you inform your coalition partners on all of this? Taoiseach, have you challenged Minister Cowan on his incomplete statement? And do you accept, Taoiseach, that a government minister challenging the accuracy or indeed the truthfulness of a Garda Pulse record is a very, very serious matter indeed?
Well, first of all, as the Deputy has said, Minister Cowan did come into the Dáil and did publicly admit that he was convicted of a drink driving offence 4 years ago, and that he was penalised for that offence, and that justice was meted out in accordance with the charge and in accordance with the offence that he committed. He adamantly and strongly denies any suggestion or implication that he sought to evade any checkpoint, and that is his very strong position, and still is. He is very, very concerned that data, which is data related to his personal files, have found their way to others, and he feels that's a very serious issue. And irrespective of what side of the House we come from, and irrespective of the issue here, that is an issue that at some stage has to be dealt with in terms of, and has to be addressed, and I'm aware that the Garda Commission has now referred that issue to GSOC, and it's one we can't ignore in terms of the and I'm not apportioning blame anywhere here because I don't know how that material left the Pulse file and ended up to various media outlets or to others, for example. I don't know how the process was. Now, I did speak to Minister Cowan the weekend before last, and he adamantly denied any suggestion or implication that he would have evaded or attempted to avoid a checkpoint. Now, at that stage, when someone says, I was told, I believe it's a newspaper says it told, and it told my Chief of Staff or gave information to my Chief of Staff, but I can't work on the basis of the sources of media. I can't verify without seeing the document myself. Now, I had a lengthy conversation last evening with Minister Cowan. I've also this morning, early this morning, seen with the permission of Minister Cowan the actual document itself. But he has made it very clear to me that he wants to pursue both issues through the mechanisms that are available to him to pursue. One, under the Data Protection and the Data Protection Commission, he's entitled to seek a correction of that particular record insofar as he believes it doesn't accurately convey what transpired, or implications can be taken from it that may not necessarily be the case. And he's pursuing that. And secondly, he feels that the entire issue has become public because of the illegal procurement of the information, as far as he's concerned. And again, we now know that that's been investigated. And he feels that his rights have been transgressed in that regard and have been undermined, and he thinks he's entitled, he believes, that he's entitled to due process in relation to both issues. He has pointed out to me that when it was first put to him, I think by a reporter or a media, that he was very taken back by the suggestion that he had sought or that he had turned away from a checkpoint. And he was very adamant about that to me. And that's why, he said there was no issue made of it at the time. There was no reference to it at the time. And that he wants to seek to correct that aspect of it. And in that context, he was clear to me that he wants to pursue his legal rights and his entitlements in respect of that. And I have kept both my colleagues in government, the Taoiseach and Minister Eamon Ryan, fully up to date in relation to my conversations with Minister Cowan and in relation to the fact that I have seen the Garda file. I'm not at liberty to disclose it because it's not my property, and I was shared it in that context. And the rest, that's the up-to-date position.
It's clear that Minister Cowan will have to come before the House and take questions on all of these issues. But for the purposes of today, Taoiseach, I'm more concerned with what you knew as head of government. And you have confirmed that you did in fact know about the Garda Pulse record, that you did in fact know that the allegation was that the Minister had sought to evade a Garda checkpoint, and that you knew that information as or before Minister Cowan was making his statement. I find that extraordinary, that you would stand over a minister who has made an incomplete statement on a matter of this importance to the Dáil. Were your coalition partners, the leaders of Fine Gael and the Green Party, aware of this Pulse record and the allegation of evading a Garda checkpoint at the time that Barry Cowan made this statement? And you've said that you had a conversation with Minister Cowan, but you haven't indicated that you challenged him on the fact that his statement was incomplete. I accept his point on data protection and let that matter be investigated by the appropriate authorities, but that's not the net point here. The net point here is that a minister is now contradicting a Garda record. A minister came before the House to make what was to be a complete no holds barred statement on all of the material matters, and he did not state that this Garda pulse record existed and that there was an allegation that he had sought to evade a Garda checkpoint. I mean, that's absolutely extraordinary. Absolutely extraordinary. It's more extraordinary that as the head of government you would accept that. And I want to know, do your coalition partners similarly accept that Minister Cowan was right to come before the House and not to give us the full information? Do they accept that he is right to challenge the Garda pulse record? And it is an extraordinary thing that you have a government minister now openly contradicting the pulse records, because let's remember this isn't just about Barry Cowan. All of us have to rely on the truthfulness and the accuracy of pulse records, don't we? We all rely on those. The minister has brought that into question, but he has also failed to give a full account of events on that night. You were aware that there was another twist in the tale, and yet it seems you haven't challenged Minister Cowan on that. Do you believe in full and frank statements to this House, or do you not, Taoiseach?
Well, first of all, you've drawn two wrong inferences and made two assertions that are incorrect. I was not aware of any of the pulse record. I didn't see the pulse record. Just because a journalist says to somebody, I have a source here, or I have a paper here that says X, I can't work on that basis. I saw the document this morning myself, and I'm glad and actually having seen the document, it's not quite as portrayed, but nonetheless the document is there. No, it's not for me to publish. It's not my record. With respect, no, it's not my record, and people have entitlements here. It's not my record. And don't be making suggestions that are untrue. Deputy Cowan himself was unaware of the record until he actually got possession of it himself in terms of exactly what was on the record. That's the only basis upon which one can comment on any record, is when one sees the record. For the last 4 years, he was unaware of any suggestion that that would be on the record. That's his point of view. And I certainly wasn't going to be prejudging or preemptive in terms of something until I see the record for myself. And I have seen it early this morning. He sought himself during the week, he contacted, I believe, the Gardaí to get possession of the record, because he didn't have it. Others had it before he had it. And there's an issue there too, in terms of the individual, any individual in that situation. He was, I mean, in my view, he didn't want to, in terms of his contribution to the House last week. Again, he hadn't the document, and he didn't want to incriminate himself in relation to it. But I think he has really, all I can convey to you is that he's very, very serious concerns about it and how the whole thing has developed. In relation to how his own personal information was procured or was disseminated from the pulse record, and that's an issue that he's extremely angry about.
Thank you very much, Deputy MacDonald. Sorry, we've been through it. Of course I have. Deputy Peter Fitzpatrick, please.
Thank you very much. Taoiseach, the Elected Special Committee on the COVID-19 response met with representatives from the Irish Primary School Network, the National Association of Principals and Deputy Principals with regard to education provisions in September. I have been contacted by a large number of SNAs who have expressed their deep disappointment and despair that they were excluded from this session. As the Taoiseach knows, SNAs have probably the closest contact with pupils in schools. They are effectively looking after the most vulnerable students in schools, and in my opinion, to exclude them from this session was wrong and deeply hurtful to the thousands of SNAs around the country. They have asked that their opinions are taken into account with regard to the reopening of schools in September. Will the Taoiseach confirm to the House that he will work with the Minister for Education and ensure that the views and opinions of SNAs will be taken into account when decisions are taken to reopen schools in September? Taoiseach, last weekend in the village of Carlingford, there was more than 60 motorhomes and caravans located there. This was way above what is normal. I note that the Minister for Foreign Affairs yesterday stated that visitors should not come to Ireland unless they restrict their movements for 14 days. With respect to Taoiseach, this type of advice means absolutely nothing unless it can be backed up by action. Over the weekend, we have seen many tourists from the USA out and about our cities and towns. I understand that in the USA, people from the state of Texas are unable to visit our neighbours because of the COVID restrictions, yet they can freely travel to Ireland. Taoiseach, can you confirm to the House today what action the government intends to take to ensure that visitors to our island respects and obeys the restrictions that are in place? Taoiseach, I also want to congratulate you on getting the contractors at the Children's Hospital back on site yesterday. Will you confirm to the House, has any additional conditions been imposed by the contractors in order to them to come back to the site at this stage? Also, with regards to costs, as we are all aware, the spiralling cost of the hospital has gained worldwide attention. Coming from a business background myself, I know how projects can overrun their budgets, but what has happened at the Children's Hospital to date is simply not acceptable. Can the Taoiseach inform the House in relation to the current situation with costs? Are measures being put in place to ensure that costs are controlled? And is the Taoiseach confident that the costs can be controlled for the remainder of the project? Thank you.
Before I call on the Taoiseach to respond, we can only raise one issue, not two, on leaders' questions. So, yeah. So maybe Taoiseach, you'd address one of the matters raised by Deputy Fitzpatrick.
It's all under the umbrella of COVID, by a stretch. But in the first instance, I will, of course, speak to the Minister of Education in terms of including the representative voices for SNAs. I think we have over 70,000 SNAs in our system now. It actually sprung from an initiative I took back in 1998 as Minister for Education at the time in special needs education. The objective of government and of the Minister is to get as full an opening as possible and return to school towards the end of August. And that relates to your question in terms of travel and behaviour, because I think if that is our number one priority, and I believe everybody in the House would share that as a priority, then I think we have to be extremely vigilant in terms of social distancing, etiquette in terms of washing hands and so on, and abiding by the public health advice. Because any slippage between now and the end of August could undermine our efforts to get the schools fully open. In the context of travel, there's been a lot of commentary in terms of the amount of American visitors. Our information back from the Department of Transport is that the numbers are quite low coming in from the US. From the outset of the pandemic, travel has never been banned officially or per se. It has never been prohibited. NEFIT will be giving us advice in his meeting today. There will be a meeting of government tomorrow in terms of stage 4 of the roadmap, or phase 4 of the roadmap. And there will be further discussions around the travel issue, which will culminate in decisions on the 20th of July in terms of drawing up a green list, and also in terms of strengthening our presence at airports and ports in respect of inward traffic into Ireland. And I've been speaking to the Chief Medical Officer. There are concerns in terms of increases in the number of COVID cases over the last fortnight. Congregated indoor settings is presenting a problem. Crowded, people, 30 or 40 in a house, for example, at house parties, is an issue. And we have to be very strong in terms of travel as well, in terms of our messaging around travel, and with a view to keeping the rate down. And that will be our objective in the coming weeks, with the overarching consideration being getting the schools open and getting the non-COVID strand of medicine opened up and freeing our hospital capacity to do that. I think that covered your third item on the Children's Hospital. That's back after COVID. There is ongoing issues between the contractor and the National Paediatric Hospital Development Board. You saw my comments on Friday. There are mechanisms in the contract for resolving any contractual issues or any issues pertaining to claims and counterclaims. Those mechanisms should be used. What is essential is that work continues in respect of building the hospital for the children of this nation. The children of this nation need a modern hospital. We're way behind in terms of getting that completed. And in my view, we from the government perspective, working through the board, want to protect the taxpayer, want to make sure that the contract is implemented and that we monitor that in a robust way, and any issues should be resolved through the mechanisms that are provided for within the contract itself.
If Fitzpatrick, you managed to get 3 for the price of 1 there, we won't be doing that again.
Thank you very much for your
Special
guidance.
offer is not available anymore.
Only for one pioneer, I'll buy you a drink. Taoiseach, first of all, Taoiseach, I want to say thanks very much because we do realise that the SNAs do a fantastic job, and I think it's very important that their opinions and expressions are concerned. Coming from County Louth, especially in the Carlingford area, they are very concerned what's happening there at the moment is. When you see so many motorhomes and the amount of people that's coming to the border area at the moment is a lot. It's very hard. It's okay for Minister Coveney to make these statements and the Taoiseach and the Taoiseach, but I think it's very important is if you do make a statement, it's very important that we do action. Also with the Children's Hospital is we all need the Children's Hospital, but the position of the Children's Hospital is we're all talking about the Children's Hospital for the wrong reason. It's the cost. As I said, I congratulate you getting the Children's Hospital back up and running yesterday, but Taoiseach, we have to keep an eye on the cost. It's very, very important. So all I'm trying to say is I congratulate you again, and I'm just going to say thanks very much for answering my 3 questions. Thank you.
That the hospital board is keeping a very, very vigilant eye on costs and is very much on the case in terms of protecting the taxpayers' interests. I have to put that on the record, and they've kept the Minister informed in relation to those efforts that they have been taking in that regard. And I think in respect of, there will be a significant degree of domestic tourism this year. And I think that's important to weigh up. We have, that our travel advisory is very consistent. We're advising people not to travel abroad except for essential reasons. And as a result, there has been a significant demand on domestic facilities and hotels and so on. And again, the message has to be that while we want people to obviously to enjoy themselves during the summer, but to do so in a socially responsible way. And in this phase of COVID, personal responsibility is essential and is key to keeping the spread of the virus down. It's a very, very dangerous virus. What worries me is that the age profile of those of the new cases is going down. I think it's important that we convey to people the serious potential long-term impact that getting this virus can have on one's health. And that's why I think in all of the holiday locations across the country that people be very conscious of that and behave appropriately.
Thank you, Taoiseach. Now, Deputy Michael Collins, please.
Taoiseach, I will try and explore solutions with you to the broadband crisis that has existed for years throughout rural Ireland, and in particular my own constituency of Cork South West. High-speed fibre broadband is a dream for everybody in rural Ireland that has turned a nightmare and has turned out to be a shameful legacy of Taoiseach after Taoiseach in this country. Taoiseach, you have 2.5 years to turn this around, and your leadership of this country will be measured in rural Ireland by many things in this term, but broadband will be the top of most people's minds. Taoiseach, the $3 billion national broadband plan signed last year, where many doubts if it will work, is something I don't want to dwell on too much today. But what I do want to dwell on is a solution, and we have it under our fingertips. And for once, it may not be Air, Vodafone, T-Mobile or any of the national operators. The solution to almost 100% of your problems is your local private wireless operator. And I give you an example that, if worked on, can be a solution you can oversee to the broadband problems in this country in your term as Taoiseach. One of these companies is Digital Force, a fixed wireless broadband provider located in West Cork, who has been providing a service for 16 years, employing 8 people, providing a service in this time to thousands of homes, businesses in the Cork County, as well as 60 schools. This business has grown without any state assistance whatsoever in this time. They have not increased their price of their standard package in 16 years, which allows 70 megabyte. The European minimum spec has been 30 megabyte. And remember, they started out 16 years ago offering a 1 megabyte, so they have grown and continue to grow. Their network is extremely resilient, and in the recent storm of Ophelia, the most some customers experienced outage was 3 hours, while customers relying on the traditional hard-wired system waited weeks for phone and broadband lines to be restored. Taoiseach, the state sets the price for radio frequencies, and by pricing these high, there is no allowance for competition. The recent auction closure of a Cork wireless operator called Permanent being an example. The licence goes to the highest bidder. The state does not allocate the spectrum for the smaller operator with prices in the millions, and the small operators do not stand a chance. Digital Forge have provided broadband to the Malek Valley, north of Bantry, when no other broadband provider could or would not help. Digital Forge provided broadband to Baltimore, and when Air came to town later to rich-pick customers, almost all of Digital Forge customers stayed with Digital Forge. Why? As they said, they had a top-class service and someone at the other end of a phone who immediately sets about resolving a problem. Taoiseach, the areas I've spoken of have benefited by having Digital Forge in West Cork, but areas like Gagan in Bandon, Kilmac-Simon in Inishannon or Sandycove in Kinsale and more in West Cork have little or no broadband ever, in spite of all their efforts to get the larger operators to deliver the extra capacity, but nothing has been delivered. Taoiseach, will you sit down with the Minister for Communications and try and create a level playing pitch by creating a two-tier solution? And by this, I don't mean in any way to disrupt the national broadband dream, which can work away behind the scenes, but that the private wireless operators given some small state assistance and recognition for being the only operator who can deliver broadband to well over 90% of rural Ireland, and maybe in some cases 100% broadband in rural Ireland for the first time.
Very much, Taoiseach.
Deputy, for that enlightening presentation, and I certainly have no issue with sitting down with the Minister in terms of that presentation. And perhaps if you wish to forward me some further details in relation to the company and its work. Now, that said, obviously the allocation of spectrum is a matter for proper procurement processes and so on. So it's not one that we can readily interfere with. But if it's your contention that the mechanism unduly disadvantages small operators, that's certainly something that can be looked at and considered. The National Development Plan, I hope, is not one that will be working behind the scenes, as you suggested. And the Programme for Government commits to an accelerated rollout of the National Broadband Plan, if that is possible. And the objective there would be to deliver it faster than the 7-year period. Now, work is ongoing between the department and the company in relation to that. And there's still some work to go in terms of being specific in terms of improving upon the timelines around the National Broadband Plan. But towards the latter end of this year, the Government would like to be in a position, would hope to have the full assessment and costings available in relation to the idea of proceeding faster, if that's possible, with the National Broadband Plan itself. I am aware of local initiatives. The Digital Hub in Skibbereen, for example, is a very good example of collaboration between private companies and the public interest, and a degree of philanthropy as well. And that, I think, proved particularly effective in terms of being a catalyst for the generation of jobs and for companies locating near the hub and in Skibbereen more widely. So I don't disagree with you in terms of the significance of broadband and connectivity in respect of rural Ireland and enabling economic recovery in rural Ireland. I think it's an essential prerequisite to enabling rural Ireland to fulfil its potential economically into the future.
I just show you the headline of the Southern Star last week, and it's been for the past 2 weeks out of a month. Our poor broadband will deter relocators. And that's the situation we've been experiencing in West Cork. And Taoiseach, I've done my best to steer away from the National Broadband Plan in my initial question, as I don't want this to be the rock you will perish on like your predecessors. A few short months ago, former Minister Bruton agreed to allow Comreg give extra capacity to broadband and mobile phone users to increase capacity in rural communities due to working at home to COVID-19. And not one community that I'm aware of in West Cork have increased capacity. One of the questions I'll ask you is in the same line is, Taoiseach, who is monitoring Comreg? And are they a law to themselves? Taoiseach, conservatively, some 100,000 customers are serviced nationally by fixed wireless operators who get no recognition from the state for what they do. With government support, these numbers could double or triple. The national scheme is spending $5,000 per household to ensure services. There are small communities with no broadband and little chance of it happening for years, if ever. It is not financially viable to build infrastructure for them. If there is 20 houses in a village without broadband, the National Broadband Plan will pay $100,000 to get these homes home service, where a fixed wireless provider could do it for a fraction of that figure and in significantly better time frame. The solutions offered by fixed wireless access operators are environmentally friendly, they don't build huge mess, run miles of cable across thousands of poles and frequently use green technologies such as wind and solar. Will you, Taoiseach, look to create this type of solution for many homes who have little or no broadband in West Cork?
A lot of these issues were looked at well in advance of the National Broadband Plan, and the Department is very clear in terms of the primacy of the National Broadband Plan as the route to creating a proper broadband connectivity across the entirety of Ireland, particularly those areas that commercially were not viable or wouldn't be viable. But I have no doubt that the new Minister is open to any innovative suggestions or proposals that would accelerate provision and that would enable particularly remote locations to have access to high connectivity, which would facilitate remote working, which is an objective of the government and the programme for government. And as the recent COVID experience has illustrated, is something that could be, I think, made more permanent in our workplace in terms of the option and in terms of enabling people to spend part of their week working from home. I think that would economically be beneficial to certain communities and certain localities. But to enable that, you do need connectivity, and that is something we all share in the House.
Now, Deputy Marion Harkin, please.
Thank you, and Taoiseach, I'm afraid that my question won't be as topical or controversial as some of the questions asked today, but it matters a great deal to the people that I represent. And I want to ask you about your commitment to developing regional growth centres, and specifically to developing Sligo as one of those centres. The 2040 plan makes lots of promises, but the programme for government is very light on detail. I mean, we're told that you're going to develop the cities of Waterford and Cork and Limerick and Galway, and then there's a mention of regional towns prospering. We need a strong statement, and I'll tell you why we need a strong statement and strong action. The European Commission has downgraded the Northern and Western region from the status of being developed to a region in transition. To be honest, Taoiseach, I thought I would never see that day. As somebody who was involved in the Objective One campaign, to see that we have gone backwards. And if you look at the Eurostat figures for GDP, you see that in 2018, we were 79 per person, compared to the South at 235 and the East at 205. Now, I know GDP has its limitations, but even if you go back to 2014, our GDP continues to fall comparatively. So we can't just say there's a gap between the regions and that it's growing. Taoiseach, it's ballooning. And if you look at the Northern and Western Regional Assembly report, it was published last November. There's a load of figures here. I'll only quote one or two. I've quoted some of them to you before. But if we look at, for example, capital investment in third-level education, it's 141 per student in the North and West. It's 197 nationally. If you look at the spend on roads, regional and local, I won't quote the figures because I'll fry people's heads, but again, they are significantly lower. And in the last 8 out of 11 years, the spend on R&D is below the national average. Many more figures. And just before I look for your answer, specifically Sligo, EI jobs 2010 to 2019, Sligo dropped by 1/3 in number, Leitrim by a half. IDA jobs, Sligo remained the same, but the national average grew by 40%. Our hospital has 40 fewer beds, Sligo University Hospital, than it had 9 years ago. So what I want to ask you, Taoiseach, is what measures specifically will this government take to redress that imbalance and to ensure that Sligo is a regional growth centre? Thank you.
Deputy Harkin, Taoiseach.
Well, first of all, as you know, the National Planning Framework does target an additional population of about over 160,000 to 180,000 additional people in the northwest, which would be about a population of about 1 million by 2040. But in the here and now, I think Sligo is the engine room in many respects for the northwest, and the higher education sector, the institutes of technology, in my view, are key to the economic regeneration, along with St Angela's, the entire edifice there. And obviously the move towards a technological university between Letterkenny, Sligo and Galway, in my view, is very important in terms of increasing your level of R&D over time. You need critical mass for research and development investments. I know in Sligo you have already strong R&D components in the robotic centre there, for example, which is probably unique across the country in terms of the quality of that centre. And to me, that's what helps to bring in inward investment, foreign direct investment. And to me, that's something that we have set up a new department of third-level education and research and science specifically for that purpose. I was very anxious that that department would be established from a policy perspective, because I think the future of the country does depend on significant investment in education at all levels, but also particularly in third level and in the fourth level research. And the move from Institute of Technology status to technological university status will enable, over time, a greater amount of research to take place. The town centre-based approach that's in the programme for government is another avenue through which we want to bring back development to towns that have suffered significantly in recent times through a range of factors, demographic and the movement of industries and the closure of certain types of industry. There's a need for a renaissance and revitalisation of many town centres across the country, and particularly in the northwest. So the programme for government identifies incentives to try and encourage people to develop buildings and residential homes within town centres themselves. There is $1 billion over the next 10 years will be spent on rural regeneration, and the Northwest has been quite effective actually in tapping into quite a number of funding streams and have had certain number of projects sanctioned arising out of such funds. Fundamentally, I think we have to build on our strengths in rural Ireland in terms of the agri-food industry, in terms of the biodiversity and forestation issues, the growing of native trees and so on. There will be investment in all of that, retrofitting as well, and there will be a need to develop alternative industries that are amenable to grow in rural Ireland. Regionally, we need to rebalance the country. There is an imbalance at the moment. I acknowledge that. And I think the programme for government is clear that it wants to redress the imbalance that's currently there at the moment.
Thank you, Taoiseach. Deputy Harkin.
Thank you, Taoiseach. And I'm unhappy at one level to hear you say you recognise the imbalance, but I'm happy at another because it's there and it's glaring. Now, you mentioned the Technological University. By the end of the year, Sligo, Letterkenny and GMIT are going to make their application. But two of the colleges are ready to go. But there is an issue about the third, and it is allowed that 2 out of the 3 would go forward and the third could join when it was ready. And I want a commitment that that can happen, because, Taoiseach, when I read the programme for government, I see the South and East Technological University mentioned twice. Not once, twice. I see McGee in Derry mentioned, but I see nothing about Connacht Ulster. So I have real concerns around that, and I want to know that once they reach the criteria, that they can go ahead. I heard what you said about the different programmes, and they're all important, but we need investment in our services, and we need incentives, and we need that 40-bed unit in our hospital. Yes, you mentioned the billion for rural investment, but we need significant real investment in those areas where we can play to our strength. Taoiseach, It hasn't happened. And I want to hear a commitment from you that it will happen, and specifically over the next number of months, how it's going to happen.
Thank you, Deputy Taoiseach, to conclude.
As far as I'm concerned, and the Government is concerned, we want to proceed with the Technological University programme as fast as we possibly can. And quite a lot of the delays to date have not been at central government fault or level, but rather, as you appreciate, trying to get the local entities and the various stakeholders in the local institutes ready or persuaded around doing it. And the South East has been one of those areas, and that's why it gets repeated reference, because it's been on the agenda for quite some time now. And again, there's a commitment to try and move that on and get it over the line. The Munster one has effectively happened between Tralee and Cork. The Dublin one happened first. Again, time is ticking. And I do think, once a programme has been decided upon, and it was decided upon quite a number of years ago, that it should be followed through. I will talk to the Minister of Health in respect of the Sligo Hospital. There are issues. I met with the HSE last week with the Minister around the winter initiative and the need to prepare and plan properly for this winter above any other winter, because we will be living with COVID-19, and that places an extra strain on our healthcare facilities and on our hospitals as we approach a new flu season. And I would be particularly worried about that, and that's why I think any extra capacity that we can bring into the system as quickly as possible we should do.
Taoiseach, that concludes today's Leaders' Questions. We move now straight ahead to order of business. The House has agreed that for the duration of the COVID-19 emergency only, the Rapporteur's report of the order of business shall not be read out, but shall be taken as read. There are therefore three proposals to put to the House today. Firstly, is the proposal for dealing with today Tuesday's business agreed to? Not agreed. Deputy MacDonald.
Ceann Comhairle, the Taoiseach